I learned the sound of his mornings before I learned his middle name. My husband is 26 years older than me. Around here, that's not a gap, it's a canyon people shout across. They shout with their eyes in the grocery aisle. They shout with their eyebrows at church. They shout with laughter at the diner when they think I can't hear. Too old, they say so often it's like a song this town thinks it wrote. Too old to keep up with me. Too old to give me a real life. Too old to be anything but a wallet with a heartbeat and an expiration date. If they asked me, I'd tell them what 4:30 looks like when the porch light paints the gravel and the rooster is still thinking about his job. I'd tell them how my husband carries 2 50-pound feed sacks slung over one shoulder like he's bringing in groceries, how he checks the heifers before his first cup of coffee, how the lines in his face are less about years and more about weather. But no one asks. It's easier to say too old than to get up before dawn and see. His name is Grant. People around town say Mr. Carter like the bank says it, respect they can't argue with. He's a farmer in boots and denim shirts, but the truth is more complicated than dirt and sunlight. He owns land that runs in 3 directions until it meets itself again. He buys broken machines and puts them back to work. He signs checks that keep 3 families afloat and half the feed stores within 40 miles very happy. They call him a millionaire when they want to remind themselves why they don't like him. Like money made him old and old made him unworthy. The day I married him, I knew what I was buying. I don't mean the house or the land. I mean the glare. The calculation behind people's eyes that adds me up and subtracts him down. I love him anyway. Maybe I love him because of everything they don't see. That first winter together, the creek jumped its banks and tried to take the lower barn with it. He and I stood in water to our shins, throwing down bales like sandbags until the rain quit arguing. When we came back inside, soaked and laughing, I sat him by the stove and made tea and warmed his hands between mine. He looked at me as if I'd handed him something he'd never had with all his money, a future that wasn't lonely. Don sat grin at me like that. I told him. He did anyway. Can sit help it, he said. He was too old that day too, just old enough to know what mattered. People in town pretend they don't remember the flood. They remember the wedding, they remember the age gap. They remember that I wore boots under my dress because the grass was damp, and they remember the exact length of his wrinkle lines when he laughed during our vows, as if joy has a timestamp and an expiration. And lately they've remembered something else, whatever he's been planning. It started with deliveries, pallets of cedar stacked by the machine shed, 2 rolls of architectural drawings in a cardboard tube leaning in the office corner, a clean white hard hat hanging on a hook beside the hat he wears in the field. He didn't hide them, but he didn't explain either. When I asked, he kissed the inside of my wrist and said, "Give me a month." For what? I asked, half teasing, half not. For faith, he said. The next week, the county inspector parked by the lane. Grant walked the perimeter with him, pointing with 2 fingers, measuring with his boot steps the way farmers measure once they've learned to trust their stride. I watched from the porch as they nodded and wrote notes. Later, a man from the bank stopped by and left with a handshake and no folder, which is how you know the conversation mattered. "Is it a new barn?" I asked, playing dumb. "Not a barn," he said, eyes soft like he was looking straight through the walls to the month ahead. "Something better." "Better than a barn?" I put a hand to my chest. "Blasphemy." He grinned. "We still survived the heresy." I tried to imagine what a man like him would build that wasn't a barn and was somehow better. A house? A gift? A secret only the wind knew? Every guess felt too small in my mouth. I didn't tell him about the other thing, the one I carried like a pebble in my shoe, the laughter at the diner when Mrs. Langley said, "Bless her heart, she's trying to keep up," and the whole booth cackled like hens, or the way an old friend from high school tilted his head and said, "You must like antiques," and I smiled because punching him would have made more work for Grant's lawyer. Or the moment standing in line at the pharmacy when a woman I barely recognized leaned in and whispered, "You poor thing. You'll be a widow before you get crow's feet," and I said nothing because the words I had were not suited for a store that sells children's gummy vitamins. I didn't tell him because I didn't want to put that dirt on his boots. He had enough on his plate, a late frost, a sick calf, a supply chain that acted like none of us needed parts until after the harvest. Instead, I told the dog. He listened better than most people and licked my wrist when I was finished. The invitation came in a cream envelope with a gold seal, founder's dinner, town hall, Saturday, 7 p.m. Black tie optional, boots inevitable. It was the kind of event where the barbecue was excellent and the gossip was better. We hadn't gone in years, but this time the mayor called Grant personally and said we could use a Carter at the head table. I could hear the mayor smiling through the phone, the way men smile when they're not asking, they're arranging. Grant covered the mouthpiece. You up for it? Do you want to? He shrugged. I don't set mind eating on paper plates at home. I'll go if you go. I said, truth. I would have gone if he'd said no. Some rooms you walk into because not walking in is louder. He clicked back to the mayor. We still be there. The week leading up to it was a study in patience. The cedar got moved. The hard hat disappeared into the truck. The cardboard tubes of drawings migrated from the office to his bedside table and then back to the office again, as if the plans themselves were pacing. Twice I walked into the kitchen and found him staring at the window, coffee cooling in his hand, like he'd seen something out there only he could see. I can wait, I said one night when we were both awake and the moon was laying a silver path on the ceiling. For the month, I said, rolling toward him. For whatever this is. He propped himself up on one elbow and brushed my hair back from my face like a man cataloging a treasure. I know you can, he said, that sits why I picked you. You didn't pick me, I said. I picked you. You were standing there at the farmer set's market with those stupid tomatoes and that stupid smile. Stupid smile? And I walked right up and said, Tio, I can cook better than you grow, Sets, and you said, Tio, I prove it, Tio, I pace, and I burned your tongue with my salsa, and you married me because you like pain. He laughed, low and sleepy, the kind of laugh people mistake for tired when really it sets contentment. I married you because you told the truth right to my face, he said, and because you looked good in those boots. Flattery, I said, we'll get you another month. He kissed my forehead. Good, he murmured. I might need two. On the afternoon of the founder's dinner, I stood at the bedroom mirror in a black dress I'd bought on sale and rescued with a seam ripper. My hair refused to decide between obedient and wild, so I gave it both. Grant appeared in the doorway in a clean white shirt and a dark blazer he wears exactly 3 times a year. He looked like the man everyone calls Mr. Carter, except for the boots. The boots told the truth about him. You look like I did something right, he said. You did, I said. You married up. He offered his arm as if we were headed to a ballroom instead of a room that smelled faintly of smoked meat and politics. We drove to town with the windows cracked and the radio humming old country, because new country makes him roll his eyes. I watched his hands on the wheel, the sure way he turns, the caution at intersections, the small tap he gives the dash when a song he loves ends. If this is too old, I thought, then maybe I've underestimated old my whole life. We parked 2 blocks away because the mayor had managed to fill every space near the hall with vehicles big enough to haul the future. Inside, strings of lights looped across the ceiling, and the town had done what towns do when they want to look important. White tablecloths, mismatched centerpieces, and a dais on a stage that squeaked when you crossed it. A banner read, Founders Dinner, 119 years like a dare. The head table was easy to spot, the mayor in a suit he'd wear to 3 more events before buying another, his wife in a dress that made her look like a tasteful present, the bank manager with his tie too tight, the editor of the local paper in a sports coat that used to belong to a thinner man. My stomach did a slow flip when I saw who else was seated near the front. Dean Grant's cousin on his mother's side, part-time real estate scout, full-time opportunist. He saw us, grinned like a fox that had seen the henhouse door swing open, and lifted his glass. Well, look who decided we're not too old for dinner, he said when we reached the table. His voice was loud enough to make sure the second row heard it. Evening, Dean, Grant said, bland as milk. I shook the mayor's hand and let him pump it until my wrist wanted to file a complaint. He sat us between him and the bank manager as if conversation were a chessboard. The place cards had our names in careful calligraphy that made me look like I'd borrowed someone else's last name for the night. The meal started harmlessly enough. Rolls, salad, a plate of brisket that justified the price of the ticket. The mayor stood to welcome everyone, told a joke that died on the tablecloth, and listed donors until the clapping sounded like rain on a tin roof. People settled. Wine did the smoothing work wine does. I let myself relax 1 inch. Then the jokes started coming from the side tables, the kind you can pretend are harmless if you don't listen to the edges. Save a dance for me, a man called to me from 2 tables away, unless your husband turns to dust at 9. Laughter. Be nice, someone else said. He said still got a couple harvests left. More laughter, tight and bright. Across the table, the bank manager glanced at Grant and then at me as if trying to calculate who would take the hit better. I kept my face still. Grant buttered his roll with great attention, the way a man does when choosing between pride and peace. On my left, the editor of the local paper leaned in. You know, he said in a conspiratorial whisper he meant me to forgive. My readers love a love story. Maybe I shall do a feature on December marriages. Give folks a little hope. Hope? I said, pleasant as pie. For what? He blinked. For love, he said. For second chances. Grant sits on his first. I said, you can run a correction before you write the article. He flushed and reached for his water glass as if it held better answers. From the dais, the mayor banged a spoon to call for attention. We've got a few awards, he said, and then some remarks from folks who keep this town upright even when the wind blows sideways. He smiled at our table, including our very own Mr. Carter. Little gasp went through me that I hid behind my napkin, so that was part of it. Grant's hand found mine under the table and squeezed once. It felt like wait for me. Dean raised his eyebrows as if to say, this should be good. He leaned past a centerpiece to catch my eye. Make sure he speaks up, he stage whispered. My hearing aids sit what it used to be. Maybe your thinking isn't either, I said, softer than he expected. He blinked, surprised, then smiled like a boy who's been dared and likes it. The awards were the usual: perfect attendance at volunteer fire drills, a lifetime achievement for a man who refused to retire from the hardware store, a scholarship for a girl with steady grades, and a letter from a teacher that made the girl's mother cry. I clapped. I even meant it. This is the part of small towns that saves us from ourselves. We remember each other in public. But the murmurs kept threading themselves under the applause. Old, too old. He looks good for his age. The words grew legs and walked up my spine. The mayor glanced at his list, smiled in our direction, and gestured to the mic. And now he said, some words from the man who knows this land better than any of us, Mr. Grant Carter. Grant removed his napkin from his lap, folded it once, and set it beside his plate with a care that felt ceremonial. He stood slowly, not because he had to, but because he learned that standing slow makes a room notice. Before he could take a step, Dean Sett's voice cut across the hum. Speak up, old man, he called, big and genial, the kind of cruelty that wears a grin. Some of us got hearing aids still on layaway. Laughter exploded. Not everyone. Enough. Heat surged up my neck, a flash fire of humiliation that made my hands go icy. My mouth opened. No words came. The editor stared anywhere but at me. The bank manager fiddled with his tie. The mayor half laughed, half winced. Like a man who'd wished for showmanship and got blood. Grant didn't look at Dean, he looked at me. His eyes held steady, the way they do at 4:30 when the day is new and no one has yet had a chance to ruin it. In that look was a question, you okay, and an answer, I've got this. He stepped toward the microphone. I sat very still, my heart pounding so hard it felt like an argument with my ribs. I didn't know then exactly what he would say or what he had been building with those drawings and that cedar and the quiet meetings that ended with handshakes and no folders. I only knew that for months he had been carrying a secret the way some men carry Bibles or burdens, and that he had chosen tonight in this room full of people with sharp tongues and short memories to open his mouth. The room settled, not quiet, but listening the way you listen when you want to catch the first drop before the rain. He adjusted the mic with 2 fingers. Evening, he said in that low, calm voice that makes tractors stop rattling. I shall keep this short. Good idea, Dean muttered to a chorus of snickers. Grant didn't flinch. He nodded to the mayor, to the bank manager, to the tables where our workers sat in clean shirts, chins high. Then he looked down at me again, just for a heartbeat, and a look passed between us so quick and complete, it felt like a hand pressed to the small of my back saying, stand tall. He did. He took a breath to speak. And that was when the woman 2 tables over, the one who told me at the pharmacy I be a widow before I had Croset's feet, cupped her hands and called out, tell us how a man your age still plans a future. Laughter rolled, meaner this time. Grant's hand closed lightly around the sides of the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask for quiet. He just waited until the laughter finished laughing at itself. And then, with the patience of a man who knows how to outlast weather, he began. Grant's voice carried low and steady across the room, but the laughter hadn't fully died. A few chuckles still flickered like sparks, refusing to burn out. He didn't force them down. He just waited, calm as weather that knows the storm will run out of itself. Too old, he said finally, repeating the words the room had tossed at him. That sets what you set are thinking. Some of you are saying it louder than you mean to. The air tightened. A few faces turned away, embarrassed. Dean smirked wider, thinking Grant had walked right into the trap. Grant's hand rested easy on the podium. Old enough to know the difference between noise and truth, he said. Noise says a man sets years make him weak. Truth says a man sets years teach him when to bend and when to stand. He could have stopped there, but Dean leaned back in his chair and let out a laugh, big, forced, the kind that demands an audience. Stand, you shall be sitting more than standing soon enough, cousin. Best not to promise what your knees can set keep. The room rippled with laughter again, sharper this time. Too many people found it easier to side with cruelty than silence. Someone from the back table called, she'll be pushing him around in a wheelchair before she's 30. More laughter rolling now, filling the hall like a tide. I felt every word like a slap. My face burned, my throat ached, and my eyes blurred. I wanted to leave, to vanish, to drag Grant out the door and back into the safety of our truck where love was louder than mockery. But I sat frozen, pinned in place by stares and snickers. My heart screamed, do something, say something. But what could I say? If I defended him, they'd call it pity. If I defended myself, they'd call it guilt. Every choice was a trap. The mayor coughed awkwardly, trying to restore order, but even he wasn't brave enough to stop the tide. People were entertained, people wanted the show. Dean leaned across his plate and raised his glass toward me. Do not sit worry, sweetheart, he said loudly, voice dripping false sympathy. When he set's gone, you set he'll have the land. At least you set he'll get something for your trouble. The laughter hit like a hammer. This time I couldn't stop the tears. They burned hot down my cheeks, and I hated myself for giving them the satisfaction. I stared at my lap, knuckles white against the napkin, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. Grant turned his head just enough to see me. His eyes met mine, calm, unshaken, the same look he'd given calves stuck in floodwater or tractors stalled at the edge of the field. I've got you, that look said. Hold on. He placed both hands firmly on the podium, leaned slightly forward, and let the silence gather back around him. One by one, the chuckles died. Curiosity replaced cruelty. People leaned in, sensing that something was coming. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Grant spoke again, slow, measured, and heavy, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need to shout. You think I am too old, he said. Maybe you set right. But tonight, you set we're about to find out what an old man can still build. The room stilled. My tears hung suspended, forgotten. For the first time all night, the laughter was gone. Every pair of eyes in that hall turned to him. Not mocking now, but waiting. And in that moment, I realized he hadn't come here to defend himself. He'd come here to reveal something. The room leaned in, caught between the echo of laughter and the promise of something they hadn't expected. Forks lay idle, glasses suspended midair. Even the mayor's smile faltered, waiting to see whether this was about to collapse or take flight. Grant adjusted the microphone with 2 fingers. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was steady, like gravel under tires, quiet, sure, impossible to ignore. You've said I'm too old, he began. Maybe I am. Old enough to have worked these fields 40 years straight. Old enough to know when a joke's cheap and when it costs more than the teller can pay. Old enough to hear the whispers in this room and recognize the sound of envy dressed up as entertainment. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortable. Others stared fixedly at their plates. Grant leaned slightly forward, his hands gripping the podium. But I'll tell you what age has given me: time to prepare, time to plan, time to make sure that when I leave this earth, I don't leave chaos behind me. He paused, letting the words sink in. And tonight, since some of you are so worried about what happens when I'm gone, I think it's time you heard exactly what I've been planning. The room stilled. Dean's grin faltered for the first time. Even his daughter, who had been watching with folded arms, unfolded them, curiosity breaking through hostility. Grant reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick and official looking. He held it up, letting the light catch the embossed seal. The air tightened, expectant. This, he said, is a document I said I've been working on for months. It sits, signed, witnessed, and ready. And it answers the question you Civ all been whispering about: what will become of her? What will become of the farm? What will become of my legacy when I sits? no longer here to carry it. The crowd shifted uneasily. I sat frozen, my breath caught in my throat. My husband hadn't told me about this envelope, not once. My heart pounded as 100 possibilities raced through me. He set the envelope gently on the podium, his hand resting on it like a weight. "You think I'm too old to give her a future," he said. His eyes swept the room before returning to mine. "You are wrong. I have already built it." And in that silence, thick, absolute waiting, he began to explain. Grant let his hand rest on the envelope for a long moment, letting anticipation stretch. Then in that calm voice that could hush cattle in a storm, he spoke. "You think I'm too old to give her a future. But while some of you have been laughing at my years, I've been using them to build something bigger than myself." He opened the envelope, unfolded a set of crisp papers, and glanced at the lawyer seated quietly near the back. The lawyer nodded once. "This is the charter for something I started months ago," Grant said. "A trust. Funded. Signed. Final. It guarantees that when I'm gone, this farm will not be sold off piece by piece. It will remain whole, worked, and alive. And the one who will guide it forward is not a stranger, not a banker, not some developer in the city. It will be my wife." The words hit the room like a stone dropped in still water. Ripples spread, visible in the shifting shoulders, the widened eyes, the startled silence. Dean sat forward, his smirk gone, his daughter's mouth parted as if to argue, but no sound came. Even the mayor, a man practiced at hiding surprise, blinked. Grant continued, "But that's not all. This trust is not just for her. It includes the workers who rise before dawn and stay past dusk. A share of profits every year as long as this land grows crops. They earned more than wages. They earned ownership in the life they helped build." At the farmhands' table, chairs scraped back as men and women stood blinking in disbelief. One of them covered his mouth with a hand, eyes wet. Grant's voice softened, "And for those who wonder if I can still think about family, yes I can. I've set aside funds for education. 2 scholarships a year for young people in this county. Whether they choose to study agriculture, medicine, or something else entirely, they'll carry this farm's legacy of work and care into the future." The hall was silent now. The silence wasn't cruel, it was stunned. Grant looked at me, his eyes shone, not with defiance, but with tenderness. "So when you ask what I've planned for her, I'll tell you, I've planned for her to stand tall, not as the wife of an old man, but as the woman who carries forward what we built together. I've planned for her to never have to beg for respect from people who laughed at her. And I've planned for this land to tell our story long after the whispers die." He set the papers down, folded his hands on them, and said simply, "That sets what age lets you do. It gives you time to build a future strong enough to outlast your critics." The room exhaled as one, like a wind had passed through it. For a long moment, the hall was completely still, the kind of stillness that follows thunder when the world realizes it just heard something bigger than itself. Then the whispers returned, but not the cruel kind. These whispers carried surprise, awe, even shame. I caught fragments. "He set up a trust. Scholarships, did you hear that? For the workers too." The people who had laughed loudest now avoided each other's eyes. Their smirks collapsed into silence, replaced by the uncomfortable knowledge that they'd been mocking a man who had outplanned them all. At the farmhands' table, one of the older workers stood up first, glass in hand. His voice cracked as he said, "To the Carters, to the farm." His toast was plain, but it carried more weight than all the speeches before. One by one, glasses lifted. Soon the whole hall echoed with a single sound, crystal meeting crystal, humble and unanimous. I turned to look at Grant. He wasn't smiling in triumph, he was just watching me, calm and sure the way he always did, as if I were the only person in the room who mattered. Tears blurred my vision again, but this time they weren't from humiliation, they were from pride, from love, from the overwhelming realization that while others had spent their energy tearing us down, he had been building us up, brick by brick, word by word, promise by promise. When the crowd began to leave, Dean shuffled past, his face tight. He muttered something like, "Didn't see that coming," under his breath, but he didn't meet our eyes. His laughter was gone. The mayor shook Grant's hand twice, overly warm now, eager to claim association with what he'd just witnessed. Others came to me, people who hadn't spoken to me all night, and said things like, "We misjudged," or "You've got yourself a good man." Their words didn't erase the hurt, but they softened it. As we stepped outside into the cool night air, the sky wide and full of stars, I felt lighter. Not because every doubt was gone, some people would always whisper, but because tonight the truth had been louder. In the truck, as the headlights carved through the country roads, I reached for his hand. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, half laughing, half crying. He glanced at me, eyes gentle. "Because I wanted you to hear it when they did. So you said no, you never had to answer them again." I said I'm too old to waste time on small explanations. Better to show them once and let it be done. I squeezed his hand. "They still never mock you again." He smiled, small but certain. "They might. People will always talk. Let them." Tonight they learned what talk is worth compared to what a man can build. I leaned against him, resting my head on his shoulder, and whispered, "You gave me more than a future tonight. You gave me dignity back." He kissed the top of my head. "That was always yours." I just reminded them. When we pulled into the driveway, the house stood waiting, warm lights glowing against the dark fields. I looked at the land stretching out in every direction, and for the first time, I didn't just see acres of crops. I saw legacy. I saw proof that love and vision could outlast gossip and age. People had mocked him for being too old, but tonight he showed them what age really meant. Foresight, strength, and the wisdom to build something that would outlive all of us. And as his wife, I realized I didn't just marry a man, I married a future he had already built for me, one that no amount of laughter could ever take away.